Well, hi everybody. I'm Professor Elizabeth Smith. I teach in the Communication Division, and I'm the advisor of the graphic and all of the graphics other entities, so Currents Magazine, Online Graphic. We have an app now, an iPhone app, so you should download it. And we just launched a new news show called G News that we're doing on Thursday nights. So I wonder if maybe you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves too, and maybe why you're interested or why you use blogs.
I'm Concord, and I direct the Counseling Center.
Yeah.
On the Associated
I've seen your name a million times in the graphic. Yeah.
And then I do some adjunct teaching for Seaver, and I also do assessment for all of student affairs.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in how this could be part of student affairs.
Yeah. That's great. What do you adjunct teach?
First year seminar primarily,
Okay.
and then some GSEP classes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I'm Bob McQuaid. I do the CDO Information Systems Quantitative Methods courses.
Okay.
And I'm mostly interested, I haven't tried blogs, I've tried virtually everything else.
Yeah.
So for someone to tell me a little bit about it before I dive in would be
Yeah.
very helpful.
And I have some, I forgot to bring it, but I was going to, I have a really good references list, and some of those I think would be right up your alley in terms of less like the communication approach and more quantitative students, graduate students, and what they use blogs for. So I'll email that out to you guys if you want that.
Great.
As a good resource. Okay, so before I kind of start through it, let me just tell you how I came to this. About 5 or 6 years ago, I just decided that my journalism students should be blogging. It seemed like everyone in the industry was blogging, and it seemed like a good way to have them kind of connect with their audiences. So I initially started the blogging requirement as just go blog. Blog about your stories. Go create any kind of blog you want to. It can be on any platform you want to. Send me the link. Check each other's blogs once a month until the end of the semester and comment. And that's it. There were no parameters around the assignment. I wanted to see what they would do with it, what they found useful. Since then, needless to say, it has evolved a great deal. So I have rubrics and expectations, but I have found it to be really, really beneficial in terms of assessment, but also in terms of student learning. So this is approached really not through a journalism perspective, but much more from a cognitive learning lens. I had some students say, oh, we want a blog. Should we come to this presentation? And I was like, you can come, but I don't know that it'll be as helpful as you think it will be. Okay, so my question when I was approaching it and when I was approaching the research regarding blogging and cognitive tools was having students produce blogs, and then how should I have students monitor each other's blogs, and how should I monitor their blogs? As you guys know, as we are all very aware, college students are what we call digital natives. They are more aware of the technology and more familiar with it than we are. And I had my first email account my freshman year of college, so I am not a digital native, but they certainly are. And so even though many of them don't blog, they really understand the concepts and the ideas behind it. So pedagogically, really for any discipline, the idea is blogging will help your students find an authoritative voice. If they know that their blog is going to be public, that it's widely circulated or even circulated with parameters. So if you use Sakai and you put the blog just on Sakai, but that their classmates can read it, the idea is that it helps them, it pushes them really to develop more of an authoritative voice. It also teaches them the concept of writing for an audience, which unless you are someone who is purposefully doing that, like with the graphic or some other kind of publication, or you're someone who just genuinely loves to blog, most of us as students don't get to write for an audience. So it helps really in those two arenas. So what the research is showing us is that it really helps with individual learning, but it also really helps with collaborative knowledge creation, which is kind of what we always want to be happening, right? We want to see what is coming out of these healthy classroom discussions, but sometimes we can't capture those. So blogs and commenting on blogs is a great way to do that. So I approach this through constructivist theory, Ackerman, but certainly you could find lots of theorists, that learners fashion their own knowledge and their relationships to their world through their use of tools. And in my doctoral program at GSEP, I'm working through now Vygotsky, and so all this idea of tools and mediation and all of that. But Powell said technology is altering the relationship between knowledge and the knowledge provider, creating new environments for learning, and blogs are certainly one of those places. Dew and Wagner did a pretty extensive study. This is one that I think you might be really interested in, where they looked at nursing students, nursing graduate students, who were blogging as part of their internships, their off-campus internships. And they found a lot of really, really good information. They found that and then Dew and Wagner have actually done extensive studies past 2008, but they found that it was really relevant for most disciplines, most classrooms, that what it does is encourage individual reflection, collaborative learning, as I mentioned, that writing prompts can be really helpful, which is one thing I use forums for in Sakai, which is, I think, a good supplement to the blogging function. So it can help students to get them started in their writing, and that multimedia projects, which certainly can be incorporated into blogs, they increase project management skills, research skills, presentation skills, and critical thinking skills. Okay, so knowledge creation is through metacognition, so we can kind of figure out what we don't know when we're reading someone else's blog, and maybe an experience in an internship or in a subject or with a paper that we didn't necessarily encounter, by sharing our own or sharing each other's successes. Sharing our unsuccessful learning. I couldn't bring myself to write failure because I thought that was just so negative. It's
We come from two different schools.
True. It just felt like there was a period on the end of failure, whereas unsuccessful learning could turn into successful learning, whatever that may be. And so it becomes an archive that can create this really nice catalog of how our knowledge of a subject or experience in an area has grown. I really liked this quote because I think as educators we all get tired at some point of being considered the sage on the stage by our students, and they just want to pay us and you perform, and that's what I'm in the classroom for. And so Ellison and Wu, same Wu as from Dew and Wagner, the participatory and decentralized structure of blogging may discourage the sage on the stage approach to teaching, and instead recalibrate communication patterns so that knowledge sharing is increasingly student to student and student to instructor. And that's really what we want, is we want our students to be collaborators with us. We may be guiding them, but we don't want to be dumping out the information for them to consume. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background. Oh, no, not yet. Sorry. There were a few studies that specifically also focused on communication students. This one had a portion of the sample population was communication students. Undergrad comm students found that reading each other's blogs were actually more helpful than writing their own, and they were surprised by how much diversity their students were expressing in their blogs. I would have never thought of that, or I would have never really even thought to consider that. I misspoke. This is the study about nursing students, so it's been a while since I've had this research fresh. So they were forced to blog during their internships, and what they found is social collaboration. This was actually really interesting because most of the students continued to interact on their blogs even after academic credit was given. So they found that there was a lot of activity going on, and part of the reasoning behind that, according to the researchers, is that because these were off-campus activities, the students felt a little isolated from their classmates. And when you're in an internship, you're not going to go to your internship supervisor every day and talk about how awesome the experience is, probably, or what you're learning, because you want to seem, kind of cool and like you know what you're doing and that it's not all new. So this was kind of a great place for them to do that, or to gripe about it, or to ask questions. So I don't really know how to do this, and I'm kind of embarrassed to ask. What do you guys think? And the faculty for this particular study were not involved in the blogging, so except for just to monitor the blog, but they didn't respond to any blog. So this was just student-to-student interaction. Okay, so in my class, just to give you a little bit of the evolution, I teach I teach various journalism classes. The one that I created this class, Journalism 345, I created the current iteration of it. Reporting and editing. As I mentioned, I introduced blogs to the class, and I really wanted just to increase their critical thinking. What I really, really wanted was to be able to look at their blogs and find out what was happening. So if a story turned out terrible, but it wasn't because of the writing, what was the problem? And I was hoping that the blogs would help us do that. So this is the longest course in the Comm division that has incorporated blogs into the curriculum. So it's been interesting, and I've shared the blogs with the permission of the students, although they are public blogs, with the other faculty, especially for assessment. So the parameters or the requirements that I put around the assignment is that you have to blog for every article that you write. So that's 9 news or feature stories. So after you turn in your story, you get 4 days to post a blog post about it. And you have to comment on at least 3 of your classmates' blogs. And it's funny how sometimes our expectations are surpassed by our students, by many times how our expectations are surpassed by our students. But I assumed that the comments on each other's blogs would be pretty rote, quick, just get it done. And I find the comments tend to be some of the most interesting discussions of the whole process. So what I've told them now in their rubric is that you need to outline any challenges that you faced, sources that were problematic. If you changed your angle, how did it change? I give them a list of criteria that I want them to touch on. And they receive a grade for it. It's actually a small portion of their grade. But I've yet to have any student who has not completed the assignment, the blogging assignment. Most of my students, even though they are communication students and journalism students and pretty savvy, most of them outside of Tumblr and Twitter have never blogged before. Most of them think of blogs as like mommy blogs, where, people talk about their kids or talk about things that they're doing on Pinterest or whatever. And most of them don't read news blogs or read the blogs of journalists. So that's part of the requirement too, is I give them a list and they have to start reading those blogs.
Do they even know actually sometimes when they're reading a blog versus a posted, edited news story?
So interesting that you say that. I mean, the lines are totally blurring. And this came out of a paper, and that's something that I kind of go into is the ethics of blogging. And actually, no, I don't think that I think a lot of times they do not, because now it looks exactly the same as any news story that you would read. The only difference might be the tone. Right. And if you're reading it quickly, it might be nuanced, or if you just don't know. Which is why I give them a list so they can get in the habit of purposefully going to blogs. But, it's interesting, even if you go to the New York Times, some of your favorite writers also have blogs. So you're reading their news stories and their blogs, and so the ethical lines are getting really blurred. And so, no, I think the answer is they don't always know. And I think, to be honest, sometimes they don't really care either. I found that students wanted more structure, so as I said, I've implemented more structure. And one of the cool things about it is they've gotten very, and not surprising, students have gotten very invested into the layout and design and the appearance of their blog. So I think, and this is what I hope is happening, their idea is if this is going to be a public blog, this is something potential employers are going to look at or potential colleagues are going to look at, so I'm going to make this as cool as possible. And almost use it as a personal website with my resume, with clips. And so, and certainly the literature backs that up, that if you really allow students to kind of go crazy and customize it, they'll be much more invested in their blogging process. So, just to reiterate, so it definitely has changed my teaching process. It has added to the time I spend grading, but in a really great way. It allows me to give them different feedback, so I can take a look at what they're writing, and instead of just critiquing their story, I have the opportunity now to critique their voice in their blog, but also their reporting process, their comments to each other. Have you thought about this? I can throw up a link to a comment. So it can be much more informal feedback on my part, or formal, but it can be really, really helpful. So in a way, for me, this has kind of helped close the loop in my, in some ways, in my teaching. And I can give student to student, or allows for student to instructor feedback, student to student, or student to audience. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I think it's, yeah. So we had a student who wrote a blog about how racist European soccer is. And I'm not really a big soccer fan, so I didn't really know much about it. And he is European. He is Irish, and so he wrote a blog about that, and he posted it at probably like 4 o'clock our time. And by the next day, it had gotten a few thousand hits, and he got a call. He was getting phone calls. They had tracked down his phone number. He was getting emails. The university was getting emails from all these soccer fans saying, this is terrible, and how could he say such things, and we are not racist. And it was such a good learning experience. He was actually frightened about it. I mean, he's a great kid and tough and can definitely defend his writing, but it scared him, I think, when he started getting such vicious feedback. But it was a great lesson in terms of what you put out there, and search engine optimization. It can get picked up and go viral quickly. And sometimes the most innocuous things, or the things you perceive to be the most innocuous, are the things that you get the most feedback on. Certainly with the graphic, we have learned that. But even in a personal blog that you think no one is going to read, it's not going to come up on a Google search, you put in European soccer racist, and all of a sudden all these Google searches and Google alerts are going to pick it up. So it was fine. Once President Ben's office got a call from somebody in Europe. So it was fine. Once we kind of talked him through it, he actually had some pride about it. Like, I have this audience of readers, and they kind of hate what I'm saying, but at least they're reading. And so that was kind of the approach that we had to take. But certainly with other blogs too. So I had some students last semester. We had the graphic reported on some DUI incidents on campus, and we had students in my class who were also reporting on that, which means they were also blogging about it, and they got a lot of terrible feedback from classmates or peers. But that's part of the process, and transparency is part of journalism. So that's something that I always try to emphasize in any assignment. So it allows for me to address their challenges. We talk about things like freedom of information, because if they turn in a story that's not complete, in the story they're not going to put, I didn't know about Freedom of Information Act. But when I go back to their blog and I say that they could have requested documents from some kind of governmental agency, or some kind of state agency, or local municipal agency, then we can talk about those things that may not have naturally emerged in another conversation, or wouldn't have emerged for a while. So I wanted to show you, I have a student blog, I have my blog, and then I have another blog that I developed just to kind of show you. And I've created a tutorial on WordPress, so I can email. I know you might be starting blogs, I can email that out. This is my opinion. I started out years ago with a Blogspot, and it was great, but it's not very customizable. And again, I think that's true for me too. The more I can tweak it and play with it and really make it mine, the more invested in it I have become. And I think I've heard the statistic that like 50% of websites that are going live now are WordPress websites. So it's not really just a blogging, it's a blogging site. And you have your options, but I can send that tutorial. It's short, it's 5 minutes, but it can get you started. So let me pull up mine. So I bought my URL for $18 off of WordPress, and this one is a set theme that they've already used, and I'll show you one that I customized myself. And I wanted this just to be a place where I could put up things that I cared about in terms of journalism, but places where I could also direct my students. So in case you didn't know this, if you ever require students to read New York Times articles or Washington Post articles, if they come to them through a social media platform, they can have unlimited access. Otherwise, you max out at 5 for a place like the New York Times. So I put all of the articles that I want them to read on a weekly basis up on WordPress or on my class Facebook pages, so that they can keep reading, and they don't have to pay for access. So this is my site, and I have a poll, and I haven't updated this since last semester because I mostly use it for my class, but we talk about ethics on here. I try to use like very topical, timely information, but the great thing is that it archives everything, and it archives every comment if you want it to be I have my settings where I've approved comments, so you can't just put anything up there. The graphic, for example, does not. So anything can go up, but we can take it down. But for my class website, it's different. I can set a calendar on my WordPress site that allows, so once they follow my blog, they'll get calendar email updates. So it's kind of great. I mean, I guess in a way, I hope it doesn't come off as self-serving. It's not that I want them to come to my blog. I'm not getting that much traffic from them, but it allows, me to have this other platform. But I also, and maybe this is a problem, but I also heavily use Sakai. So my classrooms are very online based, even though they're not online classes. So you have to be really plugged in. You have to be willing to follow things pretty religiously if you want to keep up with what's going on. And that's kind of the nature of journals and classes in general. So in my About page, I have a Twitter that's linked up with this, Facebook. Those are the only two that I have. This one I created just for my church, but it's also a blog. It's also a WordPress website. This one is totally customizable. It probably cost me $200 and probably a couple of weeks, and there's still a lot more that I want to do on it, but I wanted to have the option to have more content featured on the front. And so this is just for our children's ministry at church, but that's my daughter. So the great thing is that you can almost have unlimited tabs across the top with a customizable site. Obviously you don't want to make it too crowded. This page can be as customizable. Any of the tab pages can be as customizable as the front. Again, you can do interactive maps, you can do calendars, you can link up with photo galleries now in WordPress. So there's a lot that you could do. If your students were out doing experiential learning, you could have them post photos. You could give them access so that they could get in and update it. And the great thing about WordPress is, let's see if it allows me to. The great thing about WordPress is you can track anyone who's doing anything through your dashboard. So if I get in and post something, everyone else will see that it's me. So it's totally manageable and controllable, which is how we work it with the graphic. WordPress has a free app, which is really nice. I don't use it that much, but it can be helpful if you are out and away for periods of time from your computer and you don't have a tablet. So I just find WordPress to be very, very user-friendly, and my students tend to like it. I wanted to show you one student blog, and she actually didn't use WordPress. She used Blogspot. So this student's name is Danielle DeMeglio, and I got really good feedback. I shared her blog with a lot of the faculty in terms of making sure that they were aware of it. She's a great writer. And she was able to kind of just update every story. And one thing that Danielle did is she would go back after her story was edited and go back and update it. So if there were things about the story that she would have changed, she was really conscientious about doing that. So the other thing that I do, though, in my capstone class, so one of the things that I vacillate on, and I probably vacillate every semester, on the one hand, I do want them to be writing for an audience, and I do want them to develop this really authoritative voice, like the student who wrote the soccer blog and really had to defend his work. On the other hand, these are students who are getting ready to be professionals, and I don't want them to be putting information out there that maybe in a year or two they would, panic and want to take down, which they might do anyway. But so for my capstone class this semester, I changed the format, and I'm having them just blog on Sakai. And the reason I did that is all of them have personal websites that they've set up in a previous class. But I wanted them to just really have these great discussions that were more about the topics and less about kind of putting their information out there. So I thought I would just show you guys. Okay, so well, I'll show you their forums too. As I mentioned, I think forums are kind of a great supplement to blog. So I put up a topic once a week. It's usually very, very timely. So our first topic was on 60 Minutes did a really nice package on New Orleans losing their daily newspaper, the printed version. But here are their blogs, and it's the same requirement as the other class that I was talking about. So they have to keep a blog on all of their assignments that they've turned in. So if we go to Matt Drummond here, we have all of his entries. It's not exciting, it doesn't look amazing, but what it allows them to do is keep it self-contained. So they have this opportunity to say things that are controversial that they may not want to put out there with their name attached to it. Hopefully nothing offensive, but like Huckleberry Finn and the N-word, I have no idea what his opinion is. I haven't read this one yet, but the idea that he can kind of state it and not have to worry about a backlash from an audience other than his classmates. So I think it's kind of a nice way to test the boundaries and test your voice. So this is the first semester I've used the blogs on Sakai. I usually really want them out there with their public. But I thought because this class deals with some weighty, heavy topics that we would use these instead this time. And I've actually gotten good feedback about using them here. And I've used the blogs on Sakai before for my own classes that I've taken. So yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on blogging. Yeah.
Can you export the blogs out of Sakai into a different format? Or
No.
just kind of cut and paste? Cut and paste.
Cut and paste, yeah. Which is, you know, I mean, that's one of the things.
You can, however, turn on an RSS feeder.
So you see when they're taken.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
then you can get updated because each.
Assuming you check your RSS feed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, if you've got your
Right.
reader going.
I did have it set to where I was getting an email every time they were posting on forums, and I was like, about 2 weeks into the semester, I was like, I'm done.
That's
Because
not
I was
gonna work,
getting,
yeah.
yeah, first of all, I was getting at like 3 a.m, but also, I mean, it was filling up my email account. Yeah, and that's one thing, and probably I need some more training on this, but the thing about forums that I find so frustrating because it's so great is you can't really like search through forums, right? Okay. So for assessment, you would really need, I think, you would really need the faculty to be on top of what's going in there versus having to go back at the end of the semester and find all of these forum posts. But I've had, in just this class alone, several hundred posts because they have to comment on each other's work as well.
So what do you find as far as whether or not to use a forum or to use a blog? What is your criteria?
So my criteria is if I'm putting up a prompt, I do it on forums. If it's them talking about their own work, they do it on blogs.
Okay.
There's nothing scientific about that. I just have found that forums work really well for me to start a topic.
Right.
And then they can kind of get in there and discuss it. But blogs are so much more personal, even though they don't look like it on here, even though they are so much more personal, I want that to be their own.
Yeah.
Kind of, this was my idea or whatever.
I mean, and this is a very biased perspective. To me, the forums are back to the 1980s of
Yeah.
discussion boards.
Yeah.
And
they look like it too.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
It probably doesn't change much in that
Yeah.
zone, and basically you've got to go down into each message to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to your blog that you had up there that's in Sakai, I'm just
Mhm.
curious. So students can all the students can see it and they can reply,
Yes.
and then it's all basically on that one page.
Yes.
Well, it depends. The student can say it can only be read by the instructor and me,
Oh.
or it can be read by the entire class, or it can be read by the world,
Yeah.
and you have to then distribute the RSS feed out to the world for that to happen.
Okay, so it actually can be public if the student elects to make
If
it.
the student elects to it and publishes the RSS feed, it can technically be public, but only theirs. They can't like
Right.
publish somebody else's.
It doesn't allow you to get into
Yeah.
Sakai. Yeah.
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 So a follow-on question to this is, as a journalism professor, I'm going to assume that you enjoy reading.
Yeah. Yes.
As a quant professor, reading is something that I do because it forces, if I,
Yeah.
I don't even like to read emails that have more than like one paragraph.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel you. And even as much as I love reading, I mean, sometimes reading a blog, the story, the edited story, sometimes it's a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And like I said, it does create more work. I mean, there are more places where you're being expected to get feedback.
Right.
And, you know, at least the undergrad students, I'm sure yours are even more so, they're savvy. They don't want to just do work for no reason, you know? So it is more work.
So what proportion of their grade is the blogging experience?
Small.
So you do a lot more work for a very small.
I do. But I have found, and in my evaluations, but just anecdotally, that I have had students who have said, I brought up my blog, or sometimes it will just turn into a professional where they put up all their clips and they, you know, use it to discuss topics in a job interview, and I was offered a job. So I think, especially for our students, it's really important for them to have it.
Part of the e-portfolio.
Yeah. Which we don't actually, as a division, use the e-portfolios. We kind of do this instead, but I think we might be looking into doing that. So I think it's really important, but it's a lot of grading.
And do you have a rubric you could show?
Yes, I can. I don't have it here. I have it on my home computer, but I'll email it to you guys if you want it. Which the rubrics have made. You know, when I first was just blog.
Right.
They wanted more structure, but also the rubric has made it much easier for me to grade because I can just kind of look for certain things. Yeah.
Now, and I mean, you said that initially it was just blog, and then now you've kind of narrowed the scope a little bit. If you were advising the guys in the math department or computer science or something like that, how they might engage their students in this, how would you see them utilizing it, maybe even just an off the head?
Well, one thing is, do you guys require internships?
In the full-time program, yes.
Okay. So that might be great for students who are involved in some kind of externship or internship to get involved in. And also, if there's a project-based class, it might be really, really helpful to see how they're progressing through their projects through a blog. So to have them, to require, you know, a weekly update, and individually, not as a group, so that you can hear the different voices. So that way, that might help eliminate some problems at the end. It might, you know, help you give them some, you know, I see that you guys are going this way, but maybe you can go this way, that you just can't get from a group discussion. One of the things that I like about forums, and this is also true for blogs, is that, you know, in class discussion, you really can get some magic that you can't get anywhere else. But the thing that I love about forums or blogs is that every student is kind of putting some thought into what they're communicating, which you don't always get in a classroom discussion or in an informal meeting where they're updating you on their project. So I think that's really nice. So maybe a project-based class or some kind of externship or internship. Anything else? Do any of you guys blog? No. Yeah.
I'm afraid somebody might search it out and I'd be attacked like that kid was.
No. Poor kid.
That's all I need. You know? One more phone call to the president, I might not, you know, make it back.
Well, so he was so freaked out about that incident, which I don't blame him. And then he kind of got great about it. He wrote another blog about Armenian genocide. So as a joke, I called him into my office and I said that the consulate had called and they were really upset with him and they wanted to talk to him on the phone, and then I told him it was a joke. He was a great student though. Yeah.
on the blog and courses, can you sort by any, or is it just basically by date?
No. That I'm not sure, but Alan is saying no.
It's all date.
So yeah.
Most recent up top.
But you could search on a student name, for example.
Well, it's all student name driven. So in order to get to their blog, it's just a list of names.
It's just
You
massive.
click on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
So you'd only see what that one person did.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Right.
And there were some, this is another class. Let me see if I can give you an
Have you
example.
received, did you get permission from any of these students
To show their blogs?
display their work?
Yes, for today I did, yeah.
Okay.
There was some with media in here. Yeah, so that's one complaint that I've had a little bit too, is like inserting media is not the easiest thing. So, looks like that picture worked out better than the other, but it's great practice, especially for our first run. And I will say this, just especially in terms of like managing them, if you use the Sakai blogs, it's just much easier for you because you're not going to a million links; they're just right there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And afterwards, you'll share some materials?
Yes, I will email out my references and I'll email out my tutorial if you're interested in it. And anything else you guys need.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
That's
Thank you
great.
guys for coming.
Have you had any challenges? Like people refusing to blog?
No, I haven't. It might also be the population I'm working with though, because they kind of know they need to be.
Well, if they want to be journalists,
Yeah.
they need to be out there.
Yeah. But no, I haven't. I would assume that someday I will. Some student will challenge it. But yeah, and generally, if they are motivated enough to get their story done, get it done on time, have their sources, they don't mind writing a blog about it, you know, and that blog may get more circulation than their actual story does. So,
Thank you again.
yeah, thanks.